You learn pretty quickly that the postcards don't tell the whole story. To the tourists who clog up Route 441 every October to see the leaves turn, the Great Smoky Mountains are a playground. They see the rolling blue ridges, the waterfalls, the black bears that look cute from the safety of a car window. They buy the fudge in Gatlinburg and take selfies at Klingman's Dome and go home thinking they've communed with nature. But I've been a ranger here for 22 years, and I can tell you that nature out here isn't a playground. It's an ancient, indifferent beast that tolerates us at best, and sometimes when it gets hungry or bored, it stops tolerating. We have a saying in search and rescue: the mountain keeps what it takes. Usually, that refers to the bodies we never find, the hikers who step off a trail to pee and fall into a ravine, or the kids who chase a butterfly into a rhododendron slick and get turned around until hypothermia sets in. It's tragic, but it's natural. It's gravity, exposure, and bad luck. But in the last year, the mountain has stopped keeping them. It started giving them back. And God help me, I wish it hadn't. It started with a kid named Elias, not a local, but a college student from UT Tuxville on a solo weekend trip. He was smart, athletic, packed right for the weather. He filed a plan with the backcountry office, stuck to the Appalachian Trail near the Dome, did everything by the book. But on a Tuesday morning, he just vanished. His camp was found undisturbed, tent pitched, sleeping bag unrolled, boots neatly side by the fire ring. It was like he had been plucked straight out of the air. We ran a massive grid search. Dogs, drones, 50 volunteers combing the brush shoulder to shoulder. For 3 days we found nothing. No scent, no tracks, no shredded clothing. On the 4th morning, just as the incident commander was about to scale back the operation to a recovery mission, my radio crackled. "Base, this is Unit 4. We have a visual on the subject." I was the closest unit, maybe half a mile down the ridgeline. I double-timed it to the location, expecting to find a dehydrated, hypothermic kid. Or worse, a body. What I found was Elias walking casually down the center of the trail. He looked pristine. That's the only word for it. It had been raining for 2 days straight. A cold, miserable mountain drizzle that turns everything to mud. But Elias' expensive hiking boots were clean. His jacket was dry. His hair looked like head just stepped out of a shower. He wasn't limping, shivering, or calling for help. He was just strolling, hands in his pockets, looking at the trees like he was on a Sunday promenade in a city park. "Elias," I called out, keeping my distance. "You learn to be careful. Hypothermia can make people delirious and aggressive." He stopped and turned to me. The movement was smooth, too smooth. It lacked the natural, jerky micro-adjustments a human body makes when turning on uneven ground. He smiled. It was a wide, beaming expression that showed a lot of teeth. "Hello, Ranger," he said. His voice was clear and melodious, showing none of the raspiness of someone who hadn't drunk water for 3 days. "Is there a problem?" "We've been looking for you, son," I said, moving closer to check his vitals. "You've been missing for nearly 96 hours. Are you hurt? Missing?" He tilted his head to the side, a bird-like gesture. "I haven't been missing. I've just been walking." I got close enough to grab his arm. His skin wasn't cold. It was warm, too warm, like a fever, but without the sweat. I shone my penlight in his eyes to check for concussion. His pupils didn't constrict. They stayed wide and black, swallowing the light. And as I stood there, holding his arm, waiting for him to blink, to flinch, to do anything human, I realized he hadn't blinked once since he turned around. Not once. He just stared at me with that fixed, pleasant smile, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that was just a beat too slow to be real. "I'm ready to go home now," Elias said. "I have so much to tell everyone." I shivered, and it wasn't from the mountain air. We brought Elias down the mountain. The Emps looked him over and scratched their heads. His vitals were perfect textbook. Perfect. Blood pressure 120/80, exactly. Heart rate a steady 60 beats, per minute, never fluctuating. Even when they stuck him with an IV, he was discharged to his parents the next day. They were weeping with relief, hugging him, thanking us for the miracle. Elias stood there amidst the crying and the hugging. his arms hanging limp at his sides. That same pleasant, empty smile plastered on his face. He looked like a mannequin that someone had dressed up to play the role of grateful son. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was shock. Trauma does weird things to the brain. But 6 months later, it happened again. This time it was Sarah, a 34-year-old mother of 2 from Charlotte. She was hiking the Alum Cave Trail, a popular, heavy traffic route. She stepped off the trail to take a photo of a rhododendron bloom and never stepped back on. Her husband, who was 10 feet away, turned around and she was gone. No scream, no sound of struggle, just gone. We launched the search within the hour. For 5 days, the mountain gave us nothing. Then, on the 6th day, a maintenance crew found her walking down the fire road 10 miles away from where she vanished. I was the first ranger on the scene. When I pulled up in my truck, she was standing in the middle of the gravel road, staring up at the canopy. Just like Elias, she was immaculate. Her makeup was perfect eyeliner sharp, lipstick unsmudged. Her clothes smelled like laundry detergent, not sweat and mildew. "Sarah," I asked, stepping out of the truck. She turned. That same smooth hydraulic rotation of the neck, that same unblinking stare. "Hello," she said. I sat with her in the back of the ambulance while the paramedics checked her out. I tried to get a statement to understand what happened. "Do you remember where you went, Sarah?" I asked, notebook ready. "Did you get lost? Did someone take you?" She looked at me, her eyes tracking my pen movement with unsettling precision. "I wasn't lost. I was invited." "Invited by who?" "By the song," she said. "The beautiful song in the dark." "What song, Sarah?" She didn't answer. She just hummed. It was a low, discordant sound, vibrating in the back of her throat. It didn't sound like any song I'd ever heard. It sounded like wind blowing over the mouth of a deep, wet cave. It made my teeth ache. After she was released, I couldn't let it go. I spent my off hours in the park archives, digging through boxes of old case files that hadn't been digitized yet. I was looking for precedents, missing hikers who returned unharmed, but changed. I found them. Buried in the paperwork from the 70s and 80s were dozens of similar reports. Subject found in pristine condition despite severe weather. Subject exhibits amnesia and lack of affect. Family reports subject seems distant, unfamiliar. One report from 1982 sent a chill down my spine. A father reporting that his 7-year-old son, found after 3 days in the woods, no longer recognized the family dog, and the dog, a gentle golden retriever, would snarl and hide whenever the boy entered the room. The files described a pattern that had been ignored for decades, dismissed as trauma or psychological breaks. But laid out together on the archive table, they told a different story. These people weren't traumatized. They were hollowed out. They were returning from the wild, stripped of whatever made them, and filled with something else. Something that knew how to wear clothes and speak English, but didn't know how to blink, didn't know how to love, and remembered a song that sounded like the earth groaning. I looked up Sarah's contact info. I needed to see her again. I needed to know if the song had stopped, or if she was still humming it in her sleep. 2 weeks later, I drove out to Charlotte under the pretense of a welfare check and a follow-up interview for the park's official report. Sarah's house was a nice suburban split level with a manicured lawn and a minivan in the driveway. It looked perfectly normal, but when Sarah's husband David opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept in a month. His eyes were sunken, his hands shaking as he held a cup of coffee. "Ranger Silas," he said, his voice hushed. "Thank you for coming, please. Come in. Keep your voice down, Ches. Resting." We sat in the kitchen. The house was quiet, too quiet for a home with 2 young kids. "Where are the children?" I asked. "My mother's," David whispered, glancing nervously at the ceiling. I couldn't. "They were scared of her, Ranger. The baby screams every time Sarah picks him up. And Sarah, she doesn't care. She just smiles that awful smile, and holds him until he stops crying from exhaustion." He leaned in, desperate to unburden himself. "It's not her. I know how that sounds. I know the doctors say it's PTSD or dissociation. But I've been married to this woman for 10 years. I know how she breathes. I know how she laughs. This woman, she doesn't eat, Silas. I haven't seen her take a bite of food since she got back. She sits at the table and mimics chewing if we're watching, but later I find the food in the trash or hidden in napkins. and she doesn't sleep. I wake up at 3 in the morning, and Shez just standing by the window, staring out at the dark. Staring at what? The mountains, David said, his voice cracking. She just stares west, perfectly still, like Shez waiting for a signal. I asked to see her. David led me to the backyard sliding glass door. Shez out there now, she likes the rain. It was pouring outside, a heavy gray deluge. Sarah was standing in the middle of the yard, wearing a thin sundress, barefoot in the mud. Her arms were at her sides, her head tilted back towards the sky. She wasn't shivering. She wasn't moving to wipe the water from her eyes. She was just existing. I stepped outside. Sarah. She didn't turn. I walked around to face her. The water ran down her face in rivulets, but her eyes were wide open, unblinking against the rain. That plastic, serene smile was etched onto her features. Up close, I saw something that made my stomach turn. The skin on her neck, just below the jawline, looked loose. It rippled slightly, independently of her breathing, as if something underneath was shifting, trying to get comfortable. "The song is getting louder, Ranger," she said without moving her lips. Her voice seemed to vibrate from her chest rather than her throat. "What does the song say, Sarah?" She finally looked at me. Her pupils pulsed, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the light. "It says there are so many empty rooms down there, and we are going to fill them all." I left the house shaking. I drove straight back to the park, my mind racing. I pulled up the map of the park on my computer, a massive detailed topographical grid. I marked the location where Elias went missing. Then Sarah. Then the boy from 1982. Then a dozen others from the old files. I looked for a pattern. At first it seemed random. They were miles apart, in different terrains. But then I overlaid the geological survey maps, the ones that showed the subterranean limestone formations. They didn't line up with trails. They didn't line up with roads. They lined up with a single massive uncharted fissure system that ran deep beneath the park's bedrock. A cave system that theoretically shouldn't exist, stretching from Klingman's dome all the way to the outer foothills. Every single disappearance happened directly above a major junction in that subterranean web. They weren't getting lost on the mountain, they were being pulled under it. And whatever was down there wasn't just keeping them. It was making copies, and sending them back to replace us. It didn't take long for the pattern to hold. 3 days after I left Charlotte, a call came in over the dispatch. A solo hiker, Mark Henderson, hadn't checked in at his scheduled endpoint. Mark wasn't a tourist. He was a survivalist, a guy who ran a YouTube channel about bushcraft. He knew the woods better than most rangers. If Mark was missing, it wasn't because he twisted an ankle. I looked at his filed route. He was bushwhacking through Sector 4, an area of dense, old-growth hemlock that sat directly on top of the widest part of the fissure system I had mapped. "Dispatch, this is Unit 1, I said, grabbing my keys. "I'm taking the lead on the Henderson SAR. I'm heading out now." "Copy that, Unit 1. Do you want backup?" "Negative," I lied. "I'm just doing a preliminary sweep. I'll call it in if I find sign." I couldn't risk bringing anyone else. Not if I was right. Not if the thing in the woods could wear faces like masks. I drove to the trailhead and hiked in. The woods were unnaturally quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Just the wind moving through the high branches and the crunch of my boots on dead needles. I pushed hard, moving deeper into the backcountry than most patrols ever go. As I neared the coordinates where Mark's GPS tracker had last pinged, the air grew heavy and cold. A low fog began to curl around the trunks of the trees, smelling faintly of ozone and wet stone. I unclipped my radio to check in with base, but instead of the usual static, a sound poured out of the speaker that made me drop it in the dirt. It was a hum. A low, dissonant, multi-tonal drone. It sounded exactly like what Sarah had done in the back of the ambulance, but multiplied by 100, it was a choir of the lost. "Ranger," a voice cut through the hum. It sounded like Elias. "Ranger, are you coming to walk with us?" I snatched the radio up. "Who is this? Identify yourself." "It's warm down here," another voice said. "Sarah, the rooms are so soft." Then a third voice broke through, panicked and raw. "Help me. Oh God. Somebody help me. It's gray. Everything is gray. Mark," I yelled into the mic. "Mark, is that you? Don't listen to them." Mark screamed, his voice distorted by interference. "That's not me. They're mimicking me. I'm still here. I'm in the hole. I'm in the..." His voice was cut off by a wet, tearing sound, followed by the hum swelling in volume, drowning out everything else. I killed the radio. The silence that rushed back into the forest was deafening. I stood there, hard hammering against my ribs, realizing the horrifying truth. The people who came back, they weren't the victims escaping. They weren't even brainwashed. The real Elias, the real Sarah, the real Mark. They were still down there, trapped in the dark, screaming into the void, while something else practiced their voices, tried on their mannerisms, and prepared to walk out into the sunlight wearing their lives. I wasn't on a rescue mission anymore. I was on an interception mission. I had to stop whatever was pretending to be Mark before it got to the trailhead. I checked my shotgun loaded with slugs and moved forward into the fog. The trail ended, giving way to a jagged, rocky ravine that looked like a scar in the earth. And there, sitting on a mossy boulder at the bottom, was Mark. Or at least, something that was trying very hard to be him. I scrambled down the slope, sliding on loose shale, keeping my shotgun leveled. The figure at the bottom didn't turn at the sound of my approach. It just sat there hunched over, its back to me. It was wearing Mark's distinctive red rain shell, and his pack lay on the ground beside it. Mark. I barked, stopping 20 feet away, hands where I can see them. The figure didn't raise its hands. Instead, its shoulders began to twitch, a jerky, spasmodic motion, like a marionette being tested by an inexperienced puppeteer. "Mark," I said, hands up, slowly, agonizingly. The figure began to stand, but it didn't stand up like a human. It unfurled. Its legs straightened with a sickening series of pops and cracks, the knees bending backward for a split second before snapping into the correct orientation. The torso twisted around, defying the natural range of a human spine, until it was facing me. It was Mark's face, the scruffy beard, the scar over the left eyebrow, the blue eyes. But it wasn't finished. The skin on the left side of his jaw was sagging, drooping like melting wax. His left eye was slightly lower than his right, and it was drifting independently, rolling around in the socket like a marble in a bowl. "Hello, Ranger," it said. The voice was a perfect recording of Mark's, but the mouth movements didn't match the words. The lips moved a second after the sound came out, like a badly dubbed movie. "Lovely day. For a hike." "What are you?" I whispered, my finger tightening on the trigger. The thing smiled, that same wide, vacuous, unblinking smile I had seen on Elias and Sarah. "I am found. Where is Mark?" I yelled, the barrel of the shotgun shaking slightly. "Where is the man you took?" The thing tilted its head, the neck cracking audibly. It pointed a finger downward towards the earth. "He is becoming part of the song. He gave me his name. It fits well." It took a step towards me. Its movement was lurching and heavy, lacking the grace I had seen in Elias and Sarah. This one was new. It was still learning how to drive the body. "Stay back," I warned. "Why?" it asked, genuine curiosity in its stolen voice. "I am Mark. I am going home. My wife, Mrs. Me." The mention of the family, the idea of this thing walking into a house with a wife and children, touching them with those cold hands, watching them with those dead eyes broke something in me. "You're not going anywhere." I snarled. I fired. The slug hit the thing's center mass. It didn't scream. It didn't bleed red. It was knocked backward by the force of the impact, stumbling over the boulder. But as it fell, I saw the wound. It wasn't flesh and bone. Beneath the torn Gore-Tex of the jacket and the layer of stolen skin, there was a gray, fibrous substance. It looked like fungal root structures, thick and wet and pulsing. The thing hit the ground and immediately began to scramble back up. It wasn't hurt. It was just inconvenienced. It looked at the hole in its chest, then back at me, its smile widening until the corners of its mouth tore. "Rude," It hissed. Before I could rack another shell, a noise erupted from the treeline above us. The roar of an ATV voices. Ranger Silas. Hold your fire. I spun around. It was the SAR backup team. 4 rangers, weapons drawn, sliding down the ravine. Drop the weapon, Silas, the lead ranger shouted. I looked back at the thing. It had slumped against the rock. The smile was gone. It was whimpering now, clutching its chest, its face contorted in a perfect mask of human pain and confusion. The drifting eye had snapped into focus. The sagging jaw had tightened. In the span of seconds, it had recalibrated. Help me, it screamed in Mark's voice, sounding terrified and human. The ranger shot me. No, I yelled, backing away. Look at it. Look at its chest. It's not human. But the backup team couldn't see the gray roots from where they were. They only saw a missing hiker bleeding on the ground, and a ranger waving a shotgun. Silas, stand down now. I looked at the thing one last time. It stared back at me from behind the hands clutching its chest, and for just a second the terrified facade slipped. It winked. I lowered the gun. I knew I had lost. If I shot it again, they'd kill me. And the thing would still walk out of these woods. They put me on administrative leave before the ink was even dry on the incident report. Stress-induced psychosis, the department psychologist called it. Burnout. They said I was lucky Mark Henderson declined to press charges. He was just so grateful to be alive, they said. So eager to get back to his family. I didn't fight them. I handed him my badge and my service weapon. I knew that if I tried to explain what I saw, the gray roots, the shifting face, the voices on the radio, I wouldn't just be fired. I'd be institutionalized, and I couldn't protect anyone from inside a padded cell. I retreated to my cabin on the edge of the park boundary. It's isolated out here, miles from the nearest town, surrounded by the same deep woods I used to patrol. I spent the first few weeks just watching. I bought a high-end police scanner and a shortwave radio setup. I listened to the frequencies the park uses and the local emergency bands. At first it was quiet, but then the reports started coming in. Not from the park, but from the towns surrounding it. A domestic disturbance in Gatlinburg. A man attacking his wife because her eyes were wrong. A missing child found in a playground 3 days later, who terrified his mother by standing in the corner of his room all night, humming a low, vibrating song. A rash of sudden, inexplicable personality changes in locals who spend weekends hiking. I keep a map on my wall. Every time I hear a report like that, I put a red pin in it. The pins are spreading. They started clustered around the park entrances, but now they're moving outward. Knoxville, Asheville. Chattanooga, the infection is leaking out of the wilderness. I saw Mark Henderson on the local news last week. He was doing an interview about his miraculous survival. He looked perfect, handsome, articulate, charming. He held his wife's hand the entire time. But I watched closely. I watched the high-definition feed, and I saw it. Every time the camera cut away and came back, his hand was in a slightly different position on hers, but his fingers never moved. He wasn't holding her hand. He was testing the grip, calibrating the pressure. And his wife, she looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she flinched, just barely. Every time he leaned in to kiss her cheek. They aren't just replacing us one by one anymore. They are learning. They are adapting, and they are multiplying. Last night, I woke up to a sound outside my cabin, a twig snapping. Then the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel driveway, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. I grabbed my personal shotgun, the one the department couldn't take, and sat in the dark facing the door. I didn't turn on the porch light, I didn't call out. I just listened. The footsteps stopped right at the base of my porch steps. Silence stretched out for a minute. Then two. Then from the darkness outside, a voice drifted through the thin wood of the door. It wasn't a monster's voice. It wasn't a growl. It was my voice. "Hello, Silas," it said, in a tone indistinguishable from my own. "It's a lovely night for a walk. Why don't you come out? We have so much to tell you." I racked the slide of the shotgun. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin. "I'm ready," I whispered to the empty room. The voice outside chuckled, a low, dry sound. We know, that's why we send more than one. And then, through the window, I saw them. Dozens of pale, unblinking faces emerging from the tree line. Men, women, children, all wearing hiking gear. All smiling. All of them hollowed out and filled with the song of the mountain. I'm not a ranger anymore, but I still have a job to do. The mountain keeps what it takes, but tonight, I'm going to make sure it pays for what it sends back.